The initial scene introduces Lorenzo Vitale, a crime enforcer, who drives to his secluded Sicilian winery in the company of his grandson. On arrival, he leaves his grandson in the car and cautiously enters. To his dismay, he discovers many of his henchmen brutally murdered. Descending into the basement, he finds Robert McCall, a retired U.S. Marine and DIA operative, held at gunpoint by two of Lorenzo's bodyguards. Robert reveals that Lorenzo possesses something he shouldn't, leading to a confrontation in which Robert eliminates both henchmen and Lorenzo. Exiting the winery, Robert instructs Lorenzo's grandson to remain in the car without moving. However, as he approaches his own vehicle, the boy shoots him in the back and escapes. Despite his injury, Robert manages to board a ferry to the mainland. That night, while driving on the Amalfi coast, Robert pulls over and loses consciousness due to the gunshot wound. Local carabiniere Gio Banucci discovers him in this state and takes him to a remote coastal town in Altamonte, where a doctor named Enzo treats his injuries. Upon awakening, Robert learns Gio saved him and grapples with the notion of whether he is a good or bad man. When he attempts to return home, Enzo intervenes, insisting that his wound needs time to heal and offers him a place to stay. Enzo tends to Robert, who, after 3 days of treatment, begins to walk with the assistance of a cane. Venturing outside to explore the town, Robert makes an acquaintance with the locals, including Amina, a cafe owner and waitress who serves him coffee despite his tea order. Gio, during his regular visit to the cafe with his daughter Gabby, hands Robert his car keys and offers assistance with his bags, indicating that he hasn't checked them yet and parked the car behind the station. In the subsequent scene, Robert makes an anonymous call to the CIA Financial Operations Group and speaks with agent Emma Collins, providing information about the winery's involvement in the illegal drug trade concealed as normal business transactions. After conveying this information, he renders the phone inoperative, and Emma shares the intelligence with other CIA operatives. Robert spends the following days familiarizing himself with the town's people and discovering the presence of the Camorra, an Italian mafia gang that harasses the locals for payments. One day, he witnesses a high-ranking Camorra member, Marco Quaranta, assaulting a local seafood vendor named Angelo. Before departing, Marco threatens Angelo that he will return the next week for the money. The gang proceeds to a large building where Vincent Quaranta, the leader of Camorra and Marco's brother, is attempting to forcefully evacuate the premises for their commercialization plan. In one room, an elderly man in a wheelchair defies the Camorra, leading the gang members to hang him from a window. Meanwhile, Robert and Enzo share a pleasant dinner conversation, and Robert offers to assist Enzo with daily tasks. The next morning, he visits the market on Enzo's behalf, going to Angelo's shop. Angelo kindly refuses payment for the groceries, seeing it as an honor to have Robert visit his store for the first time. On the same day, Emma and other CIA operatives investigate the winery based on Robert's tip-off, uncovering cash and bags of illegal narcotics hidden in a storeroom. Surprised that these activities were previously unknown, Emma and her colleague Frank Conroy decide to further investigate the matter. On a rainy day, Robert inquires about the reason Enzo treated him without involving an ambulance or the police. In response, Enzo recalls Robert's initial question about being a good or bad person and how he didn't have an answer. Enzo believes that Robert's silence indicated he was a good person. The following evening, Robert prepares to leave the town but is alerted by the sound of a bell, leading him to Angelo's shop, which the town people are rushing toward. Marco and his gang have set fire to Angelo's shop due to unpaid debts. Despite their dominance, the town residents can only watch helplessly. Robert, along with some townspeople, helps Angelo clean up the aftermath. Gio reviews video footage of the firebombing and contacts the Italian Central Police to inquire about a van seen near Angelo's shop. As Robert gradually recovers, he becomes a part of the local community and deepens his friendship with Amina. He adapts to the town, but the influence of the Camorra and their plans to commercialize Altamonte troubles him more than expected. One day, while enjoying coffee at Amina's cafe, Robert notices Emma secretly trying to photograph him. He confronts her, suggesting she capture the photo from a better angle. Emma asks about his precise knowledge of the winery's true business, but Robert offers vague responses, advising her to delve further into her remaining work. As she leaves, she surprises him by addressing him by his name. Later in the day, Gio goes to pick up his daughter from school, but he receives an unsettling call from an unknown number, informing him that Gabby's school had let out earlier than usual. Worried, he inquires with one of the teachers, who reveals that an officer had picked up Gabby a little while ago. In a state of panic, he hurries home only to discover his wife and daughter held captive by the Camorra gang. Marco proceeds to beat him in front of his family, punishing him for interfering in their operations, and the gang threatens to harm his family if he intervenes again. In the evening, Robert observes Gio leaving Enzo's office with bloodstains on his face. Curious, he asks about the situation, and Enzo explains that such incidents are common in many towns due to the Camorra, an issue akin to an incurable cancer. The following day, Robert goes to a church where he encounters Emma once more. She confirms that Lorenzo Vitale had been on Interpol's most wanted list for a decade, and his operation was significant. Intrigued by why he chose her for the anonymous tip, Emma questions Robert's intentions. He deflects the question by suggesting she focus on why Sicily is being targeted for smuggling activities, promising to uncover answers soon. Emma expresses hope for answers in their next meeting. That evening, Gio and his family are having dinner at a restaurant when Marco and his associates disrupt their meal. Marco insists that Gio help them prepare a boat for their illicit activities. Robert, also in the same restaurant, overhears their conversation and asks them to leave the family alone. In response, Marco threatens him to stay out of matters that don't concern him. In a composed tone, Robert expresses his affection for the town and its people, urging Marco to relocate his business and warning of consequences if he fails to comply. When Marco disregards the warning, Robert twists his shoulder, immobilizes his hand, and forces him to leave his gun on the table, escorting his men out of the restaurant. Afterward, an infuriated Marco plans to return with his henchmen to deal with Robert. However, before they can execute their plan, Robert drives a van into two of Marco's henchmen and confronts them. At one point, Marco holds him at knife point, threatening his life. Nonetheless, Robert retaliates by immobilizing Marco's hand and using the knife to fatally wound him. The following morning, Frank contacts Emma from Rome to inform her about a recent station bombing. It's revealed that the cash found in the winery was linked to a similar act of terrorism, making Emma realize that the Camorra directly funds terrorism by smuggling drugs into Sicily. She speculates that Naples serves as the primary transit point for drug transportation and suspects the involvement of another team in Naples. Emma initiates an investigation by interviewing key members of the Camorra and requests cooperation from the head of Naples' police. Later, the police chief attends Marco's funeral at Vincent's mansion. During the event, he informs Vincent about Emma's investigation into their illicit trades. Vincent, mourning his brother's death, becomes enraged and severs the chief's hand. He then threatens the chief to focus on finding Marco's killer and sends him to the hospital with his severed hand preserved in an ice bucket. Elsewhere, Emma receives a call informing her about the police chief's predicament. Shortly after, she also receives a call from Robert, who discloses the Camorra's involvement in the drug cartel connected to the previous station attack. Robert's call inadvertently saves Emma from Vincent's planned car bomb attack on her, and she is rushed to the hospital for medical attention. There, she meets Frank and briefs him on the Camorra. After learning everything, Frank assures her that he will handle the remaining operation. That evening, Vincent takes Gio and his family hostage, threatening to shoot them in front of the entire town unless his brother's murderer shows up. When Vincent receives no information, he shoots Gio's ear and threatens to kill him with the next shot. Robert reveals himself to Vincent and requests him to release the captives, prepared to be taken away and tortured, but not in front of the townspeople. Vincent, equally arrogant as his brother, refuses, insisting the locals must witness the Camorra's consequences. However, before Vincent can execute him, the townspeople start recording the event, causing the gangsters to retreat. The same night, Robert infiltrates Vincent's home and quietly eliminates his bodyguards one by one. Vincent, asleep, awakens to a drop of blood on his forehead and the shattering of a glass above him. Although he narrowly escapes, he retrieves his gun and attempts to contact his deceased gang members. Robert approaches him, forces him to consume a lethal dose of his own drugs, and pursues him. Ultimately, Vincent collapses on the streets of Naples, succumbing to a drug overdose. The next morning, Robert visits Emma at the hospital. who expresses gratitude for saving her life. He drops a bag of cash on the floor and narrates the story of a man named Greg Dyer, who lost his pension in a cyber attack. Emma realizes that Robert followed the trail of the attack to the winery, killed Lorenzo and his henchmen, and retrieved the exact amount owed to Greg. She asks if Robert and Dyer are friends, to which he clarifies that they've met only once. In the following scene, Emma travels to Boston to deliver Greg and his wife their lifetime earnings. Greg inquires about the identity of the generous benefactor and why someone would go to such lengths for a stranger. Emma is similarly curious about the reason. After she leaves, Greg happily tells his wife they no longer need to sacrifice their home. One day, at the CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia, Frank hands Emma a package containing a diary and a note from Robert. To her surprise, it's her mother's diary. As she connects the dots, she learns that Robert is none other than a friend of her parents from the CIA. In the final scene, the residents of Altamonte celebrate their victory in a football match, and Robert joins in the festivities as one of the locals. Please subscribe for more videos, enable notifications, and leave a like to support the channel. Thank you for watching.